trust. That's what you expect from your employees, and that's what your employees can, of course, expect from you. I am now doing something which I normally do not do in my podcast, because normally when I talk about examples, I normally prefer not to mention the companies, except it's a company that frequently and over again offends the law or shows misbehavior. But normally I prefer not to mention names and organizations for a very simple reason. We want to talk about the issue, and we don't want to talk about reputation of different brands, which could easily distract from the topic and the content we want to convey and speak about. But in this case, I have to mention the name of the entrepreneur and the name of the company for a very simple reason. The person went on the media by themselves, and I'm referring to BBC News here. The headline is, "I monitor my staff with software that takes screenshots." I'm not making this up. It's a report published, you can still find it online, by Laura Jones, a business reporter from BBC News, published on September 29th in the year 2020. So this happened just a week ago. And what happens there is the entrepreneur, Shibu Philip, admits that he knows what it's like to, and I quote, "maybe waste a bit of time at work." I mean, we all know that feeling. He concludes that this is a reason that why you can now implement a software which monitors your staff by taking screenshots. His company is called Transcend, and they sell beauty products. They buy beauty products in wholesale and then resell them online. Viable business model, which of course happens around the world quite a lot. You buy something in wholesale and then you resell it. The question is, often, especially at the moment with COVID-19 in place and working from home becoming a reasonably normal situation, so remote work maybe becomes the new normal, how can we expect trust happening when I over and over again see that companies show the absolute opposite towards their own people? And I just give you a couple of examples. So we had that entrepreneur. That entrepreneur has a surveillance software in place that takes screenshots. There are different software types available. There's a software where these screenshots are published on a public intranet website so other people can see it. And then you can, when you had it by coincidence, you had it turn on during your break, you can delete screenshots. But then, of course, your working time is adjusted. We had different examples. It's not just an example of that small company which sells beauty products. A major German hospital, one of the most well-known German hospitals, one of the controllers had the idea, the machine where people log their time at the moment is located at the entrance of the hospital area. And we all know hospital areas can be huge. Walking times of 5 to 10 minutes happen frequently. So they decided to remove the machine where you log the time from the entrance to the actual place where people work, which means per day between 5 to 10 minutes per direction, so between 10 to 20 minutes per day are now not working time, but that is the time where you simply walk on the area of a hospital to get to work. And of course that didn't go down well, especially not with the unions. They ended up in front of court, and the court ruled that the machine, to keep the time, has to be placed at the entrance of the hospital area, because that's where the work begins, not when you arrive at the local station or wherever you work in that hospital. You must be able to log your time as soon as you enter the area of your work. And I can tell you, with remote work in place, we will face challenges, which, by the way, these challenges happened already, where people will challenge, when I don't have to work on site, but without any proper reason you force me to work on site, isn't my travel time already working time because I do it for you? What about business travel around half the world? Isn't that working time when I'm on an 18-hour day trip? So all these challenges will happen. What happens with the trust? And by the way, just a third example with remote work, which I not only had amongst personal friends who I knew, I saw it in different organizations happening all over the place, no matter if it's charities or free enterprise. You suddenly have people working from home, and what you do, by coincidence, of course, you put pointless meetings in place every morning and every afternoon, or if it becomes a bit too obvious, you replace these meetings by arbitrary phone calls where you simply ask people pointless questions. And of course, people realize the only reason why you call them is that you want to check if they're at their desk. And that is a problem which will become worse and worse by the minute we're talking right now. So what are the problems here? So first, your employees immediately realize what you're doing because they're not stupid. They realize you're only calling them to check if they're at their desk. You realize you only put this meeting in to put them into a certain place at a certain point in time. I just give you a really bad example how it can go horribly wrong. One company where an engineer was told he has to work from home for the next 6 months. He normally works in an office, but the office is in a location where they say it is not realistic to say it will return anytime soon. And they also think about getting rid of that part of the office building because they realize people can work from home perfectly well. So they say you just work from where you are now and everything's fine. Then there's an online meeting and someone says, why do you have a different background? And the engineer says, well, I'm now here in Spain because I just wanted to catch a bit of sun. I'm working from the hotel. They have even faster internet and broadband than I have at home. And immediately the man says, oh, that's not okay. You cannot do that. How do you dare to go to Spain? And here you see what the real point is. The real point is not that you care about the work. The real point is not that you care about the client, the customer, or the project. The real point is envy. Envy that you cannot do the same and could not do the same when you were at the age of that young man. So what's the point here? People always say, well, the work has to be done. Because of course we have to see the position of the entrepreneur as well. And I fully agree, the work must be done. No one, by the way, disputes that. No one even challenges that. But the point is the work that needs to be done, what do you think is the work people owe you? Do you think people owe you 40 hours a week, or 42, or 38, depending on which country you're in, or 45, or 50, whatever company, organization, or country you're in? Do you think people owe you a certain amount of hours? Because here's the bad news. When you think people owe you a certain amount of hours, the bad news is you obviously missed the last 20 years of leadership development and where the economy is going. Because when you think that people owe you a certain amount of hours, what happens is, and it's called flexibility of work, people stretch the tasks they have. So when, for example, I'll just give you a very simple example, you give someone a task in the morning and the person knows I can do that in 6 hours. My working day has 8 hours, so I have to call my boss after 6 hours and get a new task. So what they will do is they say, oh, it was a bit more complicated here and a bit more complicated there, and I had to call a couple of people, and they will stretching the work from 6 to 8 hours, which is not only dishonest, which is not only highly unproductive, as in German, of course, for me, the word unproductive already is disturbing enough, but the reason why people do that is bad leadership. They don't do it because they want to. They don't do it because they're bad people. They don't do it because they want to cheat on you. Maybe 1% wants to, but most people have an interest that they like their work, that they have fun at work, and that they have a good time at work. The reason why they start to be dishonest towards you is because there is no reward for them when they work better. And that's why they stretch the work to a longer amount of time so they can say, oh, I was just finished and now my day is over. Thank you very much and good evening. See you next week. At the earliest. The reason always is bad leadership. Your behavior is so non-sustainable that for weeks, months, and years, people will remember how you made them feel. People might forget what you told them. People might forget what you've done in a meeting. People might forget that you did something in a project which they didn't like. They will never forget. Never will they forget how you made them feel and which emotion you caused. And the emotion when they feel that you do not trust them is a very strong one. So of course, as promised with every podcast, how can we do it better? So step number one, when you want to do it better, step number one, so 3 steps you have to implement right now. Step number 1 is you focus on results. You don't focus on time. And now I give you something which I know some people will not agree with, but modern work works that way. I know we will have certain listeners who come from a very different time. By the way, I do as well. They come from a very different background. By the way, I do as well. And they also come from a very different working culture back in the days. And by the way, I do as well. Some of them, including me, come from the working culture where working hard and long hours was the number one goal. When you told people, oh, I work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, you were the hero of work. You got a standing ovation at work. You were the hero of every department. Bad news, these times are over. We don't have the new heroes of work. And by the way, we don't need the new heroes of work. When you assign a certain task to someone and they have 40 hours to do it, let's just do it because it's easiest to put it into 1 week. You give a certain task to someone and say you have 40 hours to complete that task, and they are able to complete it in 35 hours, it is their right to have an early weekend. And not to come to you and say, oh, look, can I have a new task? Or they have to report to you and then you say, oh, you have 5 hours left, here's another task. Because then people again will stretch the work to the amount where they say, okay, I just finished right on time. So you have to allow people to get an instant reward. And maybe you heard of the different generation problems we had. Instant reward is something that many people want at the moment, especially in these times right now. And also, we have to see when there are certain problems, because maybe you say, oh, we have a reasonable amount of evidence that someone is cheating our system, then talk to them. And by the way, don't talk to them the way that you start the discussion by saying, what have you done all wrong? No, you just open and you say, how are they feeling? What is their situation right now? Because let's face it, many of us have a more comfortable situation. I'm living at my place, no family, no children, which is way more comfortable compared to other friends who I have in my circle of friends, where I see they are thinking about, are schools opening or are they reopening? How do they keep their children healthy? How do they prepare for a situation that school will happen from home again? And then they say, oh, it is happening from home again. And the next week, oh no, you have to bring them back. And then they are reopening the economy, and then they are not reopening the economy, back, forth. This is massively stressful. And when then you as an employer, you just turn up and say, oh, look, you can be happy that you have a work. Just be happy that you have a job. And by the way, many people are unemployed right now. Be happy that you have an income. Be bloody grateful for it. This is not the way to go. Adding stress on top of massive stress is not helpful. What we will have, and this is why I addressed it in my weekly article, which we publish via the expert letter, I think we are facing the burnout at home, because when we look into the numbers, people at home work way longer than they did in corporate office buildings. Back in the old days, before COVID-19, they had a clear separation. They could say, that's work, when I leave, it's private life. And now it's not happening anymore. You work from home, and then you normally work from, let's just give an example, from 9 to 5, and suddenly, oh, our New York client has something. Could you just open your notebook again, just like 6 p.m.? Yeah, of course you can. And then the Los Angeles client has something, so it's 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and suddenly work is just all over the place, and your work is constantly merging with your home. Most people do not want that. And we cannot put our attitude, because we are self-employed or we're career obsessed or we are career people or we want to have the best career that anyone could ever have. We cannot put our attitude on their lives. That is very important. So step number 1, focus on results. Do not focus on time. Step number 2, when there are problems, talk to them. And you talk to them by asking questions, not by insulting them. And step number 3, when you want to get trust from your people, you have to show trust first. Trust is something which happens very arbitrarily. It's highly personal, it's highly subjective, it's highly emotional. There is something which is called idiosyncratic bonus, basically, and very briefly saying it's a bonus that doesn't follow logical rules. And trust does not follow logical rules. Look into elections and you see where people put their trust in. It's not based on common sense or logic. So when you want to have trust, you have to give them trust first. It's the only way. And that's why the most important 3 steps for the trust issue is: step number 1, focus on results, not on time. Step number 2, when there are problems, you talk to them, and you talk by asking how they feel and what the situation is. You don't talk to them by insulting them. And step number 3, if you want to get trust, you have to give trust first. I wish you all the best implementing that in your organization. Let's just chat if you like to. If you have any situation where you like to talk, just drop me an email, drop me a line, and we can get in touch. But now, for this week, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.